Hello and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Ness. I like to talk about books. Last week I hit my end of year goal of 6,500 subscribers and I can't believe that I hit that figure in November. That is a growth of 1,500 subscribers on my goal of last year, which I also hit of 5,000. And trying to picture that many people has been absolutely mind-blowing, and I'm just so grateful to everyone who has joined my YouTube channel this year and those that have been here for much longer on this journey. I've had this channel actually for around a decade, showing my age, and I'm so grateful to you for allowing me to have this space on the internet to talk about books, which is honestly my absolute life at this point. To be able to have somewhere to talk to other people, to make people entertained by what I love to do is just so special to me, so I'm really grateful and just thank you so much. One of the best things about having my YouTube space and also the rest of my social media accounts, which are all of these, if you want to go and check them out, but I'm not so active everywhere else as what I am on my YouTube channel, but I am hoping to change that. One of the best things is that I noticed that people want to get to know me more, and for someone that was very quiet through school and the person that was never noticed, that is really new to me and it's quite exciting, and I like that people want to get to know who I am for once. And I get a lot of questions and I absolutely welcome questions. I love chatting with people and I think questions is a great way to start a conversation. One of my favourites, which is one that I keep getting probably the most, which is probably the biggest assumption about me, is that I'm a teacher for my job. I don't know why, I must just give off like a big teacher energy. I'm not a teacher. I work in refugee support. Although I would love to be a teacher, so maybe that's why I give off big teacher energy, because that is something I've always wanted to do. And the second biggest assumption about me that I get all the time on my YouTube account is that I'm really dull and I have no personality, and I think this video will just be giving them ammunition, because actually yes, I am very dull. But I have 10 questions which people have sent in to me and they are honestly so good, and some of them are really hard. They're mostly bookish, and yeah, I just hope that you learn something about me from this video, or at least you find this really relaxing, something to put on in the background. I don't know, maybe you're washing the dishes or trying to go to sleep. If there's something else burning that you want to ask, just put it in the comments and I will respond. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in questions as well. I wasn't actually expecting to get any back, so that's really great. So the first question, which is probably one of the hardest, is from Bad Faith For You, and this is a person who comments on nearly every single one of my videos and has done for so long now, and I'm so grateful. It always makes me happy when I see this person comment. And that question is, how do you keep yourself motivated enough to read books and make videos? I'm a mood reader, so I range from reading 4 or 5 books in a week to reading no books for months. I am also a massive mood reader and I can go for months without reading a book. And I can also read like 5 books in a week, like this person has said. But it's not even just like tied to my mood, it's also tied to like the seasons as well. I tend to read more in the winter and autumn months because it's dark and there's not much you can do. There's not a lot of motivation for actually leaving the house. I barely get any reading done in the summer, and that's not because I'm a social person, that's just because I find more motivation just for everyday life in the summer. So I'm more likely to just pop to the shops, or I'm more likely to just go and sit in the garden and do some other kind of hobby. Like I say, I've had this channel for so many years now, and my motivation to read used to be tied in with my motivation to make videos, and I saw them as an extension of each other. So reading being my primary hobby and making videos about reading being an extension of that hobby. And I kind of felt like if I wasn't reading, then I didn't have content to make videos, so I used to force myself to read in order to make videos, and that was really unhealthy for me, because my motivation to make videos is so much harder to get than my motivation to read. And it really put me into a massive reading slump when I couldn't be bothered to make videos, because I felt like I couldn't be bothered to make videos and I couldn't be bothered to read to get the content to make those videos. And I think that's one tip I would give to anyone that's thinking about starting a YouTube channel or starting social media content like book talk or anything, is to get those hobbies unlinked and to make them their own hobbies. You need to have the motivation separate for reading as what you do the motivation for making videos. So where do I find the motivation to read? This is really hard because I'm motivated to read most of the time because I see reading as like the biggest form of procrastination. So if I am doing any other thing, I always keep saying to myself I would just rather be reading. And I very rarely lose the motivation to pick up a book and read, and if it's that I'm not motivated in that time, it's usually because I'm not enjoying the book that I am reading, and I'll go to some other form of bookish media. Like I'll read online comics, I will read, very rarely, but I do read some manga. If it's that I'm reading a book and I've lost motivation, I'll try and read something on my phone, like a different format of reading. I basically try and change the environment around what I'm reading if I'm lacking in motivation to read, and that usually fixes my problem. If it's that truly I don't have any motivation for reading whatsoever, that means to me that there is something wrong with my mental health, and I do have frequent ups and downs of my mental health, which is why I took a break really recently, and that's when I know that something's very wrong and I get myself to the GP. Keeping myself motivated to make videos is entirely different, and it's so hard for me to put myself out on the internet even after all of this time, and sometimes I just don't like the way I look, I don't like the way I sound. I will make a video and I'll just not be happy with it. Making videos is so multifaceted as well. You've got to find the motivation to 1, get ready, 2, prepare for the video, 3, sit down and film it in front of a camera, which is really invasive. And for the biggest one that I struggle with motivation for is editing. Editing to me is the devil. I really don't like it. It's so time consuming, and I have to say no to a lot of things in order to give myself or find time for myself to do all of those things to get a video out into the world. Like I turn down spending times with friends, I turn down going to cinema trips and playing board games with people and spending time with people because I'm like, actually no, today I am motivated to edit, I am motivated to film, or maybe both of those things, and I try and prioritize where I can doing that because that will ultimately make me feel better, because I really love making videos and it is my second biggest hobby after reading. If I can't find the motivation to do any of those things, then I just can't put a video out. So when I do feel motivated to do it, I jump on the chance to do that and prioritize that over everything else. Unlike reading, there is no way for me to get around that. The next question is from Joel Lang, and that question is, if you could pick any bookish world you could live in, which would it be and why? This is a really, really tough question. I'm really tempted to say like a book series that's set in a sci-fi genre, because I just think the idea of like space travel and having more technology at your disposal and exploring would be really, really cool, but I don't think that my human brain could probably comprehend the ability to travel to different planets. So I'm not going to go with the sci-fi genre. I think that's a little bit of a cop-out. I'm going to go for something else. One of my favourite fantasy tropes is the found a door trope. I don't know the actual name for it. It's just where someone finds a door to another world, and that other world is only really found by them or a very select few people. So I would probably like to venture into the world of the Wayward Children series, and I have book 2 here. I've been trying to find book 1. It's on my shelves. There's too many books, I can't really find it. So I would love to visit this world because I would be very intrigued to see what other world opens itself up to me. I think what type of world would open itself up to me would be something to do with food. I would hope it's something to do with food. Like a world where you can just walk around and just like eat something, just eat whatever you want, like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But always like having that ability to return to like normal Earth if you want to would be really great. I'm not very good with horror, so I don't think kind of like a scary world would open itself up to me. So I think that is like the bookish universe I would want to live in, because you still have normal Earth life, but with that little ability to go off and discover something new and live in some other sort of reality for a little bit and return home. If my other reality doesn't have the internet, then I'm not sure I would be living there. My next question is from Maria Coslane. Sorry if I've butchered that or if that's 2 words. I'm very sorry. Your favourite books. What genre is your favourite? What favourite book series? What do you do in your free time besides reading? I've got the question about what my favourite books are a few times. So I'm gonna actually answer them all as I go along. So my favorite books, this is really, really hard because I don't particularly have standout favorite books, but I do have a standout favorite genre, and my standout favorite genre will always be fantasy. Very traditional fantasy is what I like to read. I love a story with adventure and mystical beings and fairies and very typical heroes, princesses, and yeah, fantasy is my favourite genre. It hasn't always been my favourite genre. I did have a few years where historical fiction was my favourite genre, but then my history degree absolutely destroyed all love I had for history. So that's my favourite genre. That's very easy. I'm next going to come to the part with what do you do in your free time besides reading, because that's actually easier than answering what my favourite book and my favourite book series is. And what I like to do in my free time is I listen to a lot of Taylor Swift. I also have Taylor Swift vinyls. I like to talk to my friends about Taylor Swift. I like to think about Taylor Swift. I like music in general. I would say that music is my third biggest hobbies after reading and making videos, which I say is an extension of my reading hobby. I absolutely love music. I like to play the drums. Outside of listening to Taylor Swift, I listen to a lot of different types of genres of music as well. But it's predominantly things like Paramore, The Killers, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Grimes, Ashniko. This is so embarrassing. The Pretty Reckless, Evanescence. I'm a bit of an emo, I guess. Linkin Park was one of my absolute favourite bands, which I can't listen to anymore. It's so upsetting. I also like to play a lot of board games, and I play a lot of PC games as well. PC games is probably my fourth biggest hobby, and I play a lot of the Tomb Raider games, D&D and Warhammer as well, but I don't really have an established group of friends to play D&D with, so I don't do that very often. Warhammer is mainly around when my husband wants to play with his friends, because I don't have any other friends personally that play Warhammer that I can play with, so I like to do that, but it's not very frequently. I love to travel as well, and I actually had a travel blog. I actually think my travel blog was way more successful than my book content, but now that I am older, I don't have the energy to travel a lot, and also with work it's very hard to find the time to travel. That is something I would love to do again. Like I say, a lot of bookish content creators do all of these amazing group travels and all these amazing group tours, and I think that's such a good idea, and that would really bring together what my previous love for travel was and my travel content. I don't know, I don't think anybody would like to go on holiday with me. I think my favourite book series is probably Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief and all of the Percy Jackson spin-offy series that come after that. The thing I prioritise the most in books is like found family and friendship, and I think Percy Jackson series does that really well. It's also really easy to read. There's just something about it that's I just find really comforting, so I would say that's probably my favourite book series that I have. But is it like a masterpiece? No. And just because so many people have asked me questions about what my favourite books are, I'm gonna say that for this one, this is my favourite books right now, and for the other ones I'm gonna kind of do a little bit of a twist on the questions just to get more questions out of this. So my favourite books right now are Jade City by Fonda Lee. I read that earlier on this year and I can't stop thinking about it. That is an absolute fantastic book. It makes me so happy as well that some people have read that on the back of me making a recommendation for it in my mid-year wrap-up, and people have come back to me to tell me that they really loved it. I think that book is a masterpiece. The world building, the fantasy of it, the characters, what happens, the plot, it's the writing, it's all just so good. That's one of my favourite books right now. Also The Poppy War for the exact same reasons by R.F. Kuang. Dowry of Blood as well has absolutely been on my mind since I read it last year. For me, that's a book that's really emotive and really poetic. I think about that one a lot as well. So those three are probably my favourite right now, but not necessarily my favourite of all time. So the next question is Sunshine Hobie 8954, and their question was, what's your favourite special edition that you've received in a book box? This is also another really hard question because we've had so many good ones this year. I did actually make a YouTube short about this, which was also a TikTok, and I broke it down into like my favourite sprayed edges, my favourite cover changes, and my favourite end papers. And even when I made that video, I showed like 10 books in that and I wasn't really able to pick out my absolute favorites. So I'll put the link to that short in a pinned comment so you can actually see me break it down by topics. But if I'm just gonna like randomly pick off like my favorite book, we're gonna try it. This was really hard and I was really torn between this and the adult Fairyloot version of Babel and the adult Fairyloot edition of Dowry of Blood. Surprisingly, I did actually pick a Fairyloot adult book to pick as my favourite, even though those two come very close, tied second. Again, showing that my favourite subscription right now is the Fairyloot adult subscription. That is their version of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I picked this because I think that it shows the best of what Fairyloot can do. We have a colour change on the cover, which is subtle and nice. Also, I like the hints of purple, which is kind of like a Fairyloot staple. Then there's also digitally printed edges on the side, which is unique. I like that they've taken elements of the front cover and put them on the side, but it's not just kind of like taking a slice of the cover and then just printing it on the sides. They've like picked these elements out and put them on the sides and it makes sense. This edition is also hand signed by the author, which is becoming ever so rare nowadays. Beautiful end paper art, which really fits in with the cover and the feel of the book. And then the absolute best thing about this book, which is the naked hardcover, which looks like a really old book and also ties in with the plot. And I just think all of those elements make this the absolute perfect book. I love it when they do redesigns on the hardcover which relate to a book in the plot. I think that's really clever. I don't know why more books don't do this as a standard. And just to have like the oldie worldy look of this book, I think is stunning. It's absolutely my favourite book that any book box has ever done. I think this is probably one of my favourite belongings that I actually have, and if my house was burning down, I would be grabbing this. That was a great question. Thank you so much for that. The next question is from Strawberry Lime 33, and that is, what book do you wish to be made into a TV show and which book do you want turned into a movie? I don't particularly watch a lot of movies, but I will binge watch any TV show that takes my interest in the slightest. And I think that casted right, I think The Priory of the Orange Tree could make a fantastic TV series. If this had an unlimited budget with amazing CGI for the dragons, I think that this could be so good. So that's probably what I would want to be turned into a TV series, and I think maybe kind of like a 1 or 2 series limited run of that would be absolutely epic. And just for sheer laughability, I would love to see Ice Planet Barbarian be turned into a movie. I would just love to see people's reaction to that. Like, they couldn't show that at the cinema obviously, but I don't even know where that would be shown. Like, it's got such a big fan base as well that so many people would actually want to watch that. Just the media outroar would be hilarious. The next question is from Sam Lee 1994, and that is, I'm curious what some of your favourite book covers are in general and what specifically it is about you that draws you to them. For example, a favourite of mine is the cover of For the Wolf, and I really love both the minimalism in terms of the colour and also how it feels almost like layered papercraft and looks so unique on my shelves. I do agree For the Wolf is an absolutely beautiful cover. And I think what draws me to book covers is things like this, where they look unique and the art on it's been really well thought out, and that a lot of skill has gone into actually doing the art, because I love art, especially drawn art. Anything that clearly demonstrates a high skill level to me is just absolutely stunning and will catch my eye. So anything like that, if a book cover is just kind of like plain with the title on, I don't necessarily take a lot away from that. They're pretty boring to me. But where a book cover's had so much time spent on it, I'm just like, wow, that's like, I really want to appreciate that. Also covers which are really bright and stand out. So I think going back to Priory of the Orange Tree is one of my favourite book covers because so much time must have been spent on this dragon. Books with dragons on as well, I'm all over that. Books that really capture the feel as well of the book are things I'm really drawn to, like this cover of Ariadne. I think that's absolutely beautiful, and it's really picked up imagery of the book as well. And obviously someone spent a lot of time doing this, the foiling as well. Ugh. I think God Killer is also another example of a book that someone spent a lot of time doing. It's took so much skill, it's got beautiful foiling, and it picks up the theme and the vibe of the book. A recent addition on my shelves is The Art of the Prophecy, and again I think that this is another one of my favourite covers because someone's drawn this, spent so much time doing this. Another one of my favourite covers is on a book that's been on my TBR for quite a while now. I think this has been on my shelves for about 2 years and I really do need to read it, and that's A Winter's Promise, because again the drawing on this is so complex and it's so interesting, and it makes me want to read it to see what the plot is about. So I think that's kind of how I would describe books that make my favourite covers, where I'm drawn to them. They've clearly took inspiration from the actual story itself. The illustrators has spent a lot of time with the author trying to pick up what exactly the author envisions or what they want or what they think is going to sell their book, and the illustrators put a lot of time and effort in. None of this AI stuff. So that was a great question, thank you so much. The next question is JD Cakes 3241, top 3 books of all time and why, and is it the same as your top 3 favourite authors? So my top 3 books of all time is so hard. Not as hard as the question about my favourite authors though, and I've sat and thought about this question the longest. And I think my favourite books to me would be something that has shaped the way that I am as a reader. All the books that have had the most lasting impact. So I think the first book for that I'm going to talk about is, and it's so ridiculous of me to be saying this, but it's An Ember in Ashes. I absolutely adore this book, and I have this in hardback, I have it in paperback as well. And I think that this is one of my favourite books of all time because it has all of the parts of young adult that I love the most. And I've had this book for so long and it's made such a lasting impact on me. When did this come out? This came out in 2015. I think this was when I realised that young adult fantasy was what I enjoyed the most. And at the time that I was reading this book, I was jumping between different genres. I was jumping between sci-fi and historical fiction and fantasy, adult fantasy, but I really struggled to kind of like narrow down what I really liked about fantasy. And in this was the first time that I'd read really well done, something about an empire and rebellion, strong female characters and strong male characters, that romance element, the mystery, the turns and the twists in this book was just so good. And this formula in this book has been replicated so many times since then, endless amount of times since this book has been written, and it's just never hit as good as that first time that I read it done really well in this book. So I think this is one of my favourites, but it's so crazy, and I say that because I've never been able to pick up book 2. I have it, I have book 3 and I have book 4. I have book 4 signed by the author, but I've read book 1 4 times and just never been able to bring myself to read book 2 in case book 2 is just not as good as this. And I know that's stupid. One day. Oh, these are in no particular order because I actually just can't pick like my overall favourite book of all time. I think my second favourite book for this is going to be Chances by Jackie Collins. And I know that's a really weird pick, but this book was absolutely riveting. I enjoyed this book so much you would not believe. And this was the first time I'd read anything by Jackie Collins. I actually think this was the first time that I read a book written in the 1980s. And you could tell. And the reason I like it so much and the reason it stayed with me for such a long time was because this book was actually given to me by my grandma. So we were clearing out her book collection and my grandma has now sadly passed away. And it's one of my favourite memories when we were clearing out her books. She had hundreds and hundreds of books and we really wanted to narrow down her collection. And she was very torn about getting rid of her Jackie Collins books. And a lot of her books are just being recycled because they were so old and so yellowed. And I thought, you know, if this is just going to go in the bin, I'm going to read this Jackie Collins book. Why not? You know, I hear so much about Jackie Collins. And I read this 500-page book in 2 days when I stayed with her over the Christmas holiday once. And we spoke about this book all night after we'd finished it. It was so good. It's like a gangster mafia romance drama family saga. It's so trashy but so good, and the memories that I had from it, from like reading it with my grandmother, sharing that oh my god moments with her, talking to her about it, was some of my favourites, and that's probably my favourite Christmas of all time. So that's why that's one of my favourite books. For the third spot, I'm really torn between A Thousand Splendid Suns by Carla Tusini, which made me cry for days. I couldn't think about anything else other than what I'd read for so long when I read that. Also torn with Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, which is my favourite classic of all time. And A Monster Calls, which made me cry again so much. I cried so much at A Monster Calls that I think I was nearly sick. One of those three, and I'm probably leaning more towards A Monster Calls and A Thousand Splendid Suns. A Monster Calls because I think it's a really good example of how books can help you to process emotions and understand some of the traumas of the real world and real life that we don't really talk about, and that sometimes those emotions are really hard to put into words. And also A Thousand Splendid Suns is a book that I think everybody should read, which is a book that's both beautiful and horrific and horrifying and awful. So maybe those. And they are definitely not the same as my favourite authors of all time. Actually, I really struggle to think about having favourite authors because I can't think of anyone particularly that stands out as an author that I'm a really big fan of. It's not the same as like music with me. With music, I'm very clearly a massive fan of Taylor Swift. I would do anything to see Taylor Swift and to have her things and collect her music and have merch and things like that. I'm not specifically like, there's no author that I pre-order all of their stuff straight away. I buy everything of theirs. I want their merch. I want to meet them on tours. So when I think about favourite authors, I'm kind of thinking more about their writing as a craft and how skilled I think they are. And for that, I would have to be giving the #1 top spot to Tolkien. The traditional fantasy genre owes everything to Tolkien. And I'm going to give another shout out to R.F. Kuang and John Gwynne, who I think are also masters in the fantasy genre. The next question is from Lily Joy. I wanted to ask you for your video why you don't do reading wrap-ups anymore. I really enjoyed them. And I did respond directly to this question. And I think that this is my favourite question out of all of these. So I did also want to include it in this video as well. And it's my favourite because I didn't actually think anybody enjoyed my content outside of doing unboxings. And that's the main reason. I was really surprised that somebody actually asked me about my wrap-ups at all because they're not content that do really well. I don't get a lot of interaction or engagement on them, and that's why I haven't made them a priority. And I have really struggled with time this year, and I've struggled with motivation and mental health, and thinking about reading wrap-ups has been right at the bottom of my list. And I did also explain when I responded to this comment that wrap-ups are my hardest content to film because it's really hard to put into words how I feel about books sometimes, and I really want to do it in a way that's constructive. I want to do it in a way that's really reflective and it's warranted for what I'm saying, especially if I'm saying something very critical. It is hard for me to put into words how I feel about those things about books. Having the motivation to do that is really hard, especially if I've forgotten a lot of what I've felt about a book. And maybe it might be a book that I've read really quickly and I've moved on to something else really quickly. I might have forgotten around all of the elements. I'm really bad at writing down my thoughts about books, and I don't think that in terms of being a reviewer that I have a lot of skill in being a reviewer of books. I just like to read books and enjoy them. So that's why there hasn't been a reading wrap-up for a while, but also because my last one would have been scheduled to take place during my mental health break because I'm wanting to do them quarterly because I don't feel like I read enough every month to do them. But I have wanted to introduce some things to my reading wrap-ups to make them more engaging and more interesting, and I've already prepared that information, so I'm really looking forward to actually bringing out my new reading wrap-up, and it'll be up within the next week, and I hope to bring them back on a schedule. So I am sorry that people have enjoyed these and I haven't been putting them up, but they will be coming back. I'm sure I also did see a comment which I haven't pulled through onto here when I went back to my comments to check, and I'm really sorry if it was you that left this comment. I don't know if it's been moved or deleted, but someone did ask me, I'm sure, why I choose to do content around book subscriptions and why I actually get book subscriptions. And the reason that I get bookish subscriptions is because my favourite thing about being a kid was being surprised at Christmas and for birthdays. The worst thing about being an adult to me is that you pick your own presents because nobody knows what to get you, so nothing is a surprise anymore. Story about myself, I am an only child. I'm also an only grandchild. I obviously got spoiled at Christmas and for birthdays as a kid. Obviously because I was the only one for all of my grandparents, and my grandparents absolutely adored me. I feel like the luckiest person in the world to have the grandparents that I did have, and I miss them all so much, apart from my granddad, who's still alive and going and I do look after him, which is why I struggle with time. They used to get me the most epic presents for Christmas, and I always expected nothing, and they always gave me the world. And when you're a kid, it's so exciting to like get that Barbie that you really wanted on the shelves but you didn't think anyone was going to get you, or getting a pair of roller skates for the first time, getting a new bike. It was all so exciting as a kid, and you don't get that anymore. There's nothing in life that surprises me because nothing like that exists. So getting subscriptions and for them to be bookish things, like I would have loved these as a kid. It's kind of like, to me, like the adult version of getting one of those magazines when you were a kid that had like the little gifts with them. Apart from like it's a lot more expensive. I really enjoy opening them. The only thing in my life that surprises me now, so I do love it, and other people love it, and it makes other people happy, and I love talking to other people about it. Every now and again I'll get a comment saying I felt really down, and seeing this upload really cheered me up, and I just absolutely love that. That makes it all worthwhile to me. So I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but that's why I make those videos, because I enjoy getting my subscription boxes, and even if I wasn't making content I would still get them, but I upload them because it's part of an extension of my reading hobby, and I love to do that. So that's why my content works the way that it does. So thank you so much, Lily Joy, for asking that question. They are coming back, and thank you so much for enjoying the content outside of my unboxings. That means the world to me, because that's the content I truly love making. The next question is from Iferore. I'm sorry if I've butchered that. Ifarore. What's your favourite D&D character you've played? I will always default to Ranger. I love playing Ranger, and I don't know why, I just love the idea of like archery. I've never ever tried it, and I'd love to try it, and I think that's like one of my favourite elements to read in a fantasy book, is when the main character has like a bow and arrow, and I'm thinking kind of like Hunger Games, you know, Hunger Games series I absolutely love as one of like the staples of my teenage reading life. I also think it's an easy class to play, so if anyone's looking to start out in D&D, I say Ranger is a great way to start. And I also really enjoy playing Rogue sometimes. I've got to be in the mood for it, but I like to play Archer first, then Rogue. And my D&D character will always be sarcastic and grumpy. The next question is from Book Ventures of a Wildflower. I absolutely love that name. And their question is, which book/series made you into a bookworm, or more specifically, a fantasy fan? I've always read books. I can't remember not reading books. And I was always that kid in primary school that was the first one into the library, like the little primary school library before every class, and swapping books out. And I was genuinely having problems at school where I had read pretty much everything for my reading age as a hobby, so the teachers had nothing to assign me as homework anymore, so I was always being assigned things beyond my reading age, and I just clearly had a love for reading. And I'd say one of the pivotal book series that made me really into young adult fantasy was the Morganfell Vampire series, and I absolutely loved that when I was a teenager. For me, that was my introduction to young adult fantasy with some romantic elements to it, and from there it's just built onto anything else. I think in more terms of a traditional fantasy fan, that is down to the Lord of the Rings, but I didn't read them as books, I watched the movies, but I think that's where my love of traditional fantasy comes from. The first adult fantasy book that I ever read was Lord of Snow and Shadows by Sarah Ashe, and this also had a main character who could shift into a dragon, and it was very traditional fantasy and had like a little steamy scene in it. And after I read this I was like, my mind is blown, Twilight is not it, I need to be reading adult fantasy. So I think this was the book that started my love for very epic fantasy as well, and I think I read this when I was about 13 or 14. So I do have some bonus questions from Rebecca Reeds, who is also a YouTuber who is my in real life best friend. She has asked, have you read Akawar? No. When are we opening our bookshop cafe by the station in town? So this is legitimately something I've wanted to do for a lot of years now. I've wanted to open a bookshop, an independent bookshop, which is also a cafe with a license to sell cocktails on a night time to have poetry classes. And I've wanted to do this for so many years, but I don't think that the book scene in Newcastle is big enough. I'm now at the point though where I think financially I could give this a go. Even though I'd be using my entire house deposit on this, I would love to try and do this. This is one thing I want to try and achieve in my lifetime. But resale premises are just so expensive. So maybe, I don't know. If you can find me a good retail premise, Rebecca, I will go into that venture with you. What are your top 3 books on your TBR right now, and what are your 3 books that you're least looking forward to reading from your shelves? So this is actually a really good question. My top 3 books on my TBR right now are The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni, and this Fowley edition I've had for about 2 years now, and it's just time to read this. I've heard so many great things about The Prison Healer. Also Babel, which I need to get around to reading, but I'm also trying to film a reading vlog around this. And The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence in this beautiful cover. I think this also made the Goodreads Choice Awards for this year. I've seen a lot of talk about this and I'm very excited to read this one. And the books that I'm least looking forward to reading, I think one of them is A Day of Fallen Night, just because this is so long and this is going to take so much time and dedication. But I am looking forward to reading it, but it's just the longest one on my TBR right now. I can't find this on my shelves, but it is here. I think the second one would have to be A Torch Against the Night, which is book 2 to An Ember in the Ashes, just because I've been meaning to read this book for like 8 years and I haven't done so. And I may have overhyped it in my head, which is why I'm not reading it. But I know I have to read it at some point. And if it's a massive disappointment, then I'll be so upset. And I think the third one is The Silmarillion, because I bought this absolutely beautiful cover, but I bought this because it matched my edition of The Lord of the Rings, but this was like £40 and I can't just spend £40 on a book being decoration. I have to actually read it. And I just know that this is not going to be a fun read. Thank you so much to everyone who asked me questions. This was a really fun video to film, and thank you so much again if you've subscribed to me and if you've made it to the end of this video. I'm so grateful for everyone's support. Like I said, if there's something that I haven't covered in this that you are burning to ask, please do ask in the comments and I will respond. But thank you so much for everyone for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye guys.